yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and all the good stuff that there is. This is episode 62. We're already there, and I thought you thought we wouldn't even make it this far, but guess what? We did. And today, my friends, I don't just bring to you just any hoot nannies. No. Oh, no. I bring you interesting. I bring you quality. I do. Today is episode 62, and on episode 62, I am about to introduce you to a interfaith minister, a producer, a musician, an educator, an activist, a man who has spent his life being the what I'm gathering so far is being able to just be himself on some level. And that's what a lot of what we've seen throughout these episodes. And people who I seem to know that, or I get to meet through other people that just kind of know themselves. And with that, I bring on Michael DiMartino. Hey, Mike, how are you doing?
Good. Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me be myself. I don't know. That's catchy. We got to work that into a song, I think.
Right, for sure. Yeah. But yeah, I gathered that from your photos and just seeing you on your posts, and the photos that you take with other people. You know, as I'm looking through and trying to get to know you a little bit before. I personally am the kind of person that wants to have almost no interaction, no knowledge of the person before they come on. I want it to be almost like I just bumped into you on the street and we just, and you know Susan? Amazing. So tell me about yourself. Yeah, like you would in real life. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, I have to say I've really enjoyed watching some of your street magic down there in Playa del Carmen.
Thank you. It was good. It was fun. I enjoyed doing it.
Good. I've been doing some research on you, so I didn't want to walk in blind. But I love what you're saying about, not having everything scripted, being authentic, being spontaneous, being ourselves, and see what wants to emerge out of the unified field of our time together.
100%. Yes. That's part of the thing that I'm trying to do here. One of them was I just wanted to be like what I call maybe even dirty authentic. Where it's just a little too extreme of authenticity, where people are like, okay, that's a little much. But I think that's like my way of painting on some level. And maybe it's my Jackson Pollock manner of being, kind of thing. As the show itself is called On the Road and In the Waves, so it's a total throwback to Jack Kerouac. While also trying to talk about being on the internet waves or the waves of life or whatever. And so on the road, in the waves, and on the other side. And the reason I say other side is because I like to be Discordian with my guests in a way of, well, you'll see.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that deep reference to Jack Kerouac. I guess they say Generation Xer. It's kind of weird because I was the tail end of the reckless, wild generation zeitgeist moment of history of all the beat poets and the anti-war movement, the peace and love movement, the Woodstock generation, consciousness, psychedelics, music, art, the Back to the Land movement, the American Indian movement starting to regain their spiritual footing as a culture that's endured, few hundred years of genocide. So I love that analogy, but also on the backs of giants, a lot of us are here kind of building on that work and taking it further. So I appreciate that. Spontaneous, perfect setup.
Yeah, man. No, and that's, I think that this is one of the things that I knew that when we were going to talk, that we were going to have this kind of back and forth that was going to be very easy. Once again, just seeing you in your photos and seeing you with all the people that take photos with you and want to be with you, that in itself is telling me a million things, right? So it tells me that people find something attractive about you. And that in itself is most likely your jus de vivre, as they call it. Your zest for life. Your zest for life and your zest for wanting other people to have a good life. And that leads me to, go ahead.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the animal magnetism. But I like that much better. So you're a poet too. Again, keeping right in step with the whole tradition, Kerouac, the beats, the poet, engineering.
If it's not flow, it's not right. That's how I say it. You've tumbled and you've fallen, and that's okay too. That's part of flow, part of the idea of entropy in itself. But for episode 62 that we're on today, I usually like to start off the show like this, and it's Michael DiMartino. Thank you for coming on to the show. Who are you? Where do you come from? What do you do? We are interested. Please let us know.
Thank you. Well, I'm still working on the answer to that question. So, but I have a few tiny little grains of sand of insight. So I'll start, and it's so interesting because in this day, quantum consciousness has become very much mainstream. You have movies like Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, and then you have all the Marvel films about activate your superhero and the multiverse and all these parallel timelines and narratives. So I'm going to start with what's simple in the 3D kind of earthly dimension here, and then we can allow it to expand and kind of breathe from that space. But part of doing this interview, and I want to say, I spend a lot of time on Zoom calls. I was just part of a whole week of enlightening our way with, hundreds of indigenous people and leaders from around the world of thought and sustainability.
Sorry about that. We had a little hiccup. Sound hiccup.
An alien transmission. Biden just signed the Disclosure Act, so we're getting.
Right as soon as you were talking about the indigenous people, it went nuts. Sorry about that. But as you were saying, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm happy that I did. I want to say thank you for even coming on to my podcast, this small little thing, after you've done such a big thing recently. So thank you for that.
Oh, no, it's like we have to all show up in whatever ways we can. And sometimes, the baby steps count. It's the small things. It's the little details and those little human connections. And I love how you prefaced our time together. You just somehow connected with me, and you felt like, okay, you want to have this person on and talk a little more about the work that he's doing. So, but I will say, part of our time together, a third entity.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm having a bunch of hiccups in the background, but don't worry about me.
Okay, no worries. But I want to invite in just the concept of not just this time together, communication being about words, but I'm Italian. I'll use my hands a little bit, but also the energetic of whatever subject matter we're going to discuss and how that triggers people positively or negatively, how people can get activated, and that somehow this discourse, this time together, can contribute something to anybody who happens to have the opportunity to ingest whatever we're going to unarchitected ahead of time or unscriptedly share. So I think the easiest
100%.
Let's narrow it down to we're going to talk about the 3D. So
okay.
What's that?
But before you start, I want to, if you don't mind, could you give a little bit more context on what you were talking about that you just did this week, where you were talking to some indigenous people? The sound got cut out and it got all weird and chaotic there for a second. So if you could turn back to that, and then we could go into the whole 3D realm concept thing that you want to talk to. I would love to hear about that as well.
Perfect. Well, it's interesting. Let's start from the moment, we talk about the quantum realm, the quantum moment. Everything we say and do creates the moment, which co-creates the next moment, which eventually creates the future, which is always in the moment, because tomorrow never comes. It's always the now creating the future. So I love that. We'll start from the moment. We'll kind of unravel and unwind the narrative from there. But I was part of an event called Enlightening Our Way Together, and recently there was the prophetic lighting of what they call the eighth fire in Anishinaabe indigenous culture and prophecy. And it's a time where a sacred fire was going to be lit that symbolized the coming together of, well, people from all over the world, but particularly a time when the indigenous communities from North, Central, and South America, they call the eagle, North America, and the condor, would start to reunite and find each other. And it would be at a time where this traditional knowledge, this spiritual knowledge, these ceremonies, this information was going to be needed, because humanity would be at a time of a lot of challenges. There'd be a lot of things happening with the planet, with the elements, the environment, you know, things like hurricanes, floods, wildfires, you know, all these elemental, environmental, let's say, catastrophic events, and that the people would start to come together to bring this knowledge back to the world, and that it would kind of be symbolized by this lighting of this eighth fire, which just actually occurred just recently in Central America with representatives from North, Central, and South America. So we're living, I don't want to say prophetic, because it kind of gets into the realm of potentially it being interpreted as religious or new age kookery. But, I think no one can deny we're at a crossroads in human history where, we have the ability to evolve rapidly through things like the internet, which is carrying this broadcast, our discussion in different parts of the world. But we also can accelerate our demise by not listening to nature, by not making the right decisions, and kind of going off of a path of sustainability. And, we're in this time of this great purification and regeneration of the human condition. So that's what happened this week.
Wow. Oh, well, kind of just a whatever weekend, I guess, for you.
It seems so, but I will say it's interesting. I've, going backwards now from the moment, looking back towards the last few years, I've been involved in a lot of things, but really the last 3 years, I left where I live in Northern California. It's a place called Grass Valley, Nevada City, close to Lake Tahoe, beautiful Nevada, Sierra Nevada mountain foothills. And I somehow ended up in a town of about 150 people out in the most remotest southern point of the Rockies. And I've just kind of been there for 3 years, watching clouds blow by in an empty sky, hanging out at different waterfalls, and kind of just allowing the perceptions of myself, the preceptions of reality, whatever narrative I believe or bought into, to just kind of dissolve, and to try to allow myself to be available for a whole new chapter of my life, which also paralleled to, of course, the 3 years of the pandemic, the shutdown. A lot of people were isolated. There was a lot of divisiveness. I mean, so many movements came out of that, from defund the police to Black Lives Matter to All Lives Matter to so it's really, as of just a couple months ago, I was invited by some people in this community who knew me and know of me. And I say this with humility, because I've never been a shameless self-promoter. I've always been about a message. But they invited me to come back into this online community, organization called Unify, Humanity Rising, Earth Mother Network, along with the Sign Network, along with Unity Earth, and literally hundreds, if not thousands of people that are doing amazing work globally that kind of paralleled a lot of the work I did until I decided to retire, really right in the winter of 2019 to 2020, right as the pandemic was about to escalate.
Wow.
So
what was the impetus on that? Did you just have a sudden urge? Was it almost like kind of like the animals when they run away from the earthquake? I'm not kidding. I'm not even joking when I say that. I'm being in the most honest ask of ever. because it seems as though that's what it was for you. It was almost as though you had some kind of internal knowledge or connection, and you were like, bro, I need to get out of here. I don't know why. I'm not sure what's going on. And then all of a sudden, as you're walking away, the world's falling apart behind you.
Well, that was definitely it. And what was interesting, just to say that, running away from an earthquake, I lived, and this is probably where the story will end, which is actually where the story starts. In 1987, I was on my way to perform with the Grateful Dead and Olatunji for Harmonic Convergence in Telluride, and we were going to do a big, the Harmonic Convergence is, the Mayan New Year, and it's a new age for humanity. And on the way, I stopped at Hopi Land, and I met some of the elders there. It was during the August when they do their big ceremonial snake dance, which is a very ancient kind of pre-colonial, pre-Columbian ceremony. But the weird thing is 2 years later, I left Santa Cruz intuitively because I heard that voice in my head or my heart saying, get out. And I'm like, what do you mean get out? Like, I live in Santa Cruz. It's paradise here. I mean, the 80s, the Pacific Garden Mall and the culture there was really incredible. And his voice was saying, get out, get out, get out. So I literally left Santa Cruz, drove to Flagstaff, Arizona, where I ended up living. And the next day, Friday, October 13th, was actually the Loma Prieta earthquake hit and just devastated Santa Cruz. So it's interesting you say that, and we're unscripted, that you're tapping into something that was really an extremely pivotal point of my life, from being like a young, wild, globe-trotting, sadhu, deadhead, at that point in my life, psychedelic pioneer, doing all of these things, going to spiritual centers, to like all that collapsed. And I found myself out in the desert of Arizona being like, WTF, like, why am I even here? So it wasn't quite as a red alert moment when I left California in 2019 to 2020, but it was a huge decision of leaving. I had several bands at that time, very successful, the World Beatniks and Hands of Fire and the Foothills Groove. I was making a living as a musician. I had several radio shows. I was podcasting, and everyone's like, why would anyone want to sit on a computer and watch you talk? And now like, I think 90% of people have a podcast, which is fascinating.
Everybody wants a podcast. Yeah, for sure. It's I don't know what to tell you. I think that part of it might have to do with the idea of leaving some kind of mark or.
Well, amen. I think a lot of people have valid things to say that have been marginalized and not part of these conversations and communications. And then we had the pandemic where a lot of people were alienated. A lot of people had their evolution or their epiphanies or whatever they went through. This platform became a source of connection. But so briefly, I left everything. I used to manage a place called The Hub. We had like a dozen offices. We had community events and music. We were doing, we had a podcast studio, radio, and we were doing a lot of activism against the reopening of minds and kind of like ecological advocacy and activism. And I was producing events, and I was just like, time to go. And in a way, it was very challenging because I knew in my heart, I said, and I'm kind of like a person, I like to be busy. I like to contribute to the human condition. And at that point, I was just like, I got to go, and I'm going to go and do nothing. And I don't know how long that is. I don't even know what nothing looks like. But here I am just over 3 years later, and it's people like you and these authentic human connections that is kind of enticing me to come out of this maybe state of retreat or retirement in a way. I mean, I'm only, God, I don't want to divulge my age. I'm eternal. But point being that we're starting to find each other and connect and share information, and there's a collective awakening that's happening. And at the meantime, more agendas, more of the matrix, more other forces pushing back against people's accelerated evolution. So that we just kind of bookend the beginning of the journey really back in '87, Harmonic Convergence, Grateful Dead, the Hopi, which started me on this whole journey, and then the COVID, going into retreats, coming out now, and then being asked to put on like my cosmic tool belt and start to participate in helping to architect and design the world that a lot of us are working for. And I will say, you're in an amazing part of the world. Tulum, Cancun, Playa del Carmen, Belize, that whole Mayan Riviera. I lived there for a few months every winter for 20 years. And I loved it. It's really, in so many ways, it's a paradise. It's a Caribbean Mayan paradise.
Yeah, I have a very weird connection to Mexico in general. Well, I was here from 8 to 10. My mom was a very adventurous woman, and she would take me and my sister on these extremely crazy adventures, 15, 20 hours away from Mexico City, just to take us to different, places around, to go to Cancun or go to Acapulco or to go to Teotihuacan or to go see any of these Mayan sites. As a kid, I get to go see the Sun and Moon Pyramid. My mom took me to go see Halley's Comet. Just my mom was a cool mom. I don't know what to tell you. And she was willing to drive, in these crazy. You can think 85. If people are still getting pulled over now, you can only imagine what it would have been like in 1985 with a blonde woman with two blonde kids in the car and a Volkswagen while they're running around.
Wow.
Yeah.
On the road again.
So I never got this from you, and it's kind of null and void. It really doesn't matter in essence. But where were you born?
I was actually born in Connecticut, the Constitution state, quotes, and I lived there till I was 16. Literally, I think it was the day I got a license, or shortly thereafter. I got in my Plymouth Duster Slant 6, and I drove direct. I was a huge fan of like Jim Morrison and the Doors, of course, a lot of the music from the Woodstock generation. But I love particularly the Doors, Jim Morrison's music and his poetry, and of course, the West is the best. So I got in my car and I drove out to Venice Beach. This is 1980. Wow, this is 1984, because it was right at the time they were.
You were born in 63?
No, I was born in 66.
Oh, so I was off by 3. Yeah, so you're 52?
57.
I'm sorry, I don't do math very well.
That's okay.
Anyways, I'm 47. You're exactly 10 years older than me. That's amazing. You got an amazing generation, and you're still young enough that you can be tech enough and be cool enough, which is super cool. Whereas post generations were very much divided by the tech. We got to see every single moment. We got to see the ColecoVision. We got to see the Atari, the 2600. We got to watch that whole transpire happen. And I guess I'm playing here, but what was the thing that happened to you in Connecticut? And I think you already mentioned it. I think it was your choice of music, just the way that you were raising yourself on some level, with also not wanting to be in Connecticut, and you had this feeling of wanting to be somewhere else. But I'll turn it around. Was there always a part of you that seemed to be a Discordian style character, and where you were like, I don't want to be normal, and were you always the dirty hippie with the long hair, cut your hair hippie? Were you always that guy in life? And it's not a bad thing. I'm just saying that's probably what people thought about you back then. So, that's all I'm asking.
That was one of the reasons I left, because you would walk down the street, and if you had long hair, people would yell out, "You freaking hippie!" And I will say this: it's interesting, because the reality is hippie. If you look at the first letter, the letter of each word, HIPPI, stands for a happy, intelligent person pursuing infinite enlightenment. maybe not all hippies are on that page. Maybe they just, they don't take baths and they, wear lots of patchouli and, live in the woods. I don't know. But there's a lot.
The joke I always heard was, the joke I always heard is, what's a dirty hippie? He's a punk. A dirty, angry hippie is a punk.
Well, it's interesting because, like, through this generation, we saw so many things. Like, I grew up in a school, and it's interesting you asked that, and I love the questions you're asking, because I actually grew up in a very traditional Italian family, and I was like 10 years old, slinging pizzas, working at the family restaurant in Connecticut, and I was also very much into sports, and I was kind of being groomed. I was being groomed to be an athlete, really, because growing up in an Italian family, my father, construction by day, restaurant by night, hard worker, classic tourist, hardworking. My mother, amazing person, but of course, parents always want hopefully something better for their kids. So, strangely, I was being groomed as an athlete. I did baseball and football, and wrestling, and I had a natural knack for it, and I think part of it was, to be a little esoteric, it was a carryover of a genetic astrology from a past life, probably in Italy, possibly a Roman gladiator or something. But I had this aggressive tenacity to be very competitive. So, and actually, right before I went after I got out of high school, 84, right before I went to California, my 2 years in junior high school and high school, I was actually training. I was a 2-time New England wrestling champ, strangely enough. And again, seems weird to talk about myself. I'm not here like, oh, look at this, but I'm just sharing my story.
That's the whole point. The whole point's to get to know you.
Well, the interesting thing is it all plays into the big narrative. So I'm going to connect the 3D and 5D. So I was a 2-time New England state champ for my weight class at Kosciuszko Junior High School. I went into high school. And in 1982, I discovered psychedelics.
So how old were you?
I would have been 16.
I was 14. That's great. Great spot to hit it.
Well, the interesting nexus point was I discovered it, but I also discovered it by going to the Hartford Civic Center to a Grateful Dead concert of 25,000 people. When they brought the song out, St. Stephen, which is about Stephen Gaskin, who started the farm and was very much part of that Beat generation, and Kerouac and Timothy Leary and Allen Ginsberg and Ken Kesey and Neil Cassidy, that whole band of wild.
It's funny that you're mentioning all these people. I just did an interview with, oh man, please don't let me forget his name, James Heydrich. I don't know if you remember this guy. So do you know James Heydrich? Do you know the name? So James Heydrich was a guy from the 1980s who was a fake psychic. And he supposedly has a connection to Frank Dukes, who's the guy who they made Bloodsport about. And the connection there is that they were part of some CIA operative MK Ultra project. And one of the claims from James Heydrich was that he used to hang out with Timothy Leary, and he was one of the people who would pass out acid at the Grateful Dead parties. So, like, I'm wondering if there's some kind of weird connection there where you must have known James Heydrich in the past.
I refuse to answer that question on the basis it might incriminate me. We're running out of candidates to be president, so I don't want to say anything that's going to deter my potentiality in the future. But
I don't know if you know this. Sorry, I don't. Last part, but I don't know if you know that. But James Heydrich's been in prison for 32 years, supposedly based on a bunk pedophile charge, and so much so that the guy who they used 20 something, 30 something years ago, has become a devout Christian, and has repeatedly gone to the court system trying to take away to take back what he had said during court, and that he had been forced to do so by the police that were there, and he was scared, so he did it out of fear.
Well, as we know, starting with Dr. Timothy Leary, CIA, MK Ultra, all the experiments, the truth serums, that getting into the hands of people like Kesey, who got it to people like Garcia, who got it, that Timothy Leary is really one of the first people who was demonized and targeted for introducing psychedelics as a actual legitimate means of, psychiatric therapy, and was doing a lot of work at the Millbrook Institute in upstate New York. And then you had, on the other coast, you had the Ken Keseys and Neil Cassidys, who were basically doing the electric Kool-Aid acid test and basically giving it to everyone and dancing and just saying, like, let's see what happens. We're going to throw some paint on the wall and listen to the Grateful Dead. And so two very different camps. But I think, we can't really debate the fact that at that point of human history that, psychedelics played a huge part in the whole renaissance of art and music, the anti-war movement, which the CIA thought it would diffuse the anti-war movement by getting people high. And in some way, it actually did diffuse a lot of that anti-war sentiment of people who are like, well, let's just get high. We can't fight the man kind of stuff. But nonetheless, the whole zeitgeist moment of, even all the American Indian movement, the Back to the Land movement, Steve Gaskin, midwifing, Anime Gaskin, health food movement, like this huge explosion of consciousness. And since then, they've tried, but they can't put that genie back in the bottle.
I feel as though, and this is where I'm going to get Discordian with you on some things. I feel as though part of the movements that you're talking about in some way were manipulated from the natural occurrences of what they were going to be into a more radicalized and, dare I even say the word, social, in the sense of socialism. And it saddens me, because there's so many of the things that we really want to say are like save the earth, be good to the earth, and then you take that and you turn it into this really intense thing, and you get Democrats on the top of a hill screaming about one thing but fracking on another. And it's like, I don't get, and so that leads me to my next question for you, which is... Well,
I just want to acknowledge really quick, there's definitely agendas that take something that's good intention and manipulate it. Look at Sustainable Development Goals in the United Nations. A lot of good stuff there, but there's also the 18th part that's like 152 countries of the world all agreed that we have to depopulate half of the planet. So, again, there's a lot of agendas at work right now, and
I don't know if I believe that. I believe that you can place everybody who's on the planet right now in the state of Texas without any problem whatsoever, whatsoever at all. And I think we would all have 1.5 acres. I can look it up. It's a really intense number. But what we think we are, as far as like what we're doing and how much absolute problems we're having, yes, but at the same time, no. I think there's a part of it that's an agenda-driven scare tactic. Oh, the world's going to end. Oh, the world, that's all melting. We're all going to, And so you have that kind of thing that's being pushed in the same way as like, I don't know, N95 masks when you have a micron that's 5. Like the actual process of the virus was a 5 micron virus, and you're using these masks that have these 95 size circles. And everybody's getting upset that they're not wearing a mask. And it's like, but the mask doesn't do anything if it's 5 microns.
Well, I will agree with you, brother, that we're not in the age of critical thinking. And there's a lot of agendas at work, and they want people to stay in the matrix. And, whether it's pharmaceutical companies making billions of dollars or the petroleum, whatever it is, everyone's got their agenda. Even like I've been around a lot of people as an interfaith minister in the religious and spiritual community. And even there's a lot of agenda. Oh, come over to our way, come over to do this, or our way is the right way, or come and give me your, it's crazy where I live in Crestone. A movie just came out on Netflix about the Love One cult. It's this huge blockbuster about the woman who started the cult who died, and they mummified her and kept her body in the house in Crestone. It's just like everyone's got an agenda, So
yeah, it's so funny that you mentioned that, because it's like, what was the story? It was Darren Brown, and no, please forgive me, it was not Darren Brown. It was James Randi. It was a very famous magician. He became a debunker of psychics and that kind of thing. Two-part story here. One is that they made a documentary film about him, and for 30 years, his partner lied to him, and he never knew. And this is the guy who caught liars for a living. And the question is asked at the end of the film, how is it that somebody who catches liars can't catch the guy, that's lying to him? And the simple answer is it's emotion. Emotion is what kind of clouds your judgment on many levels. And then also going back to what you were saying about how people have agendas, and we're all just trying to sell something, we're all just trying to be like, this is the quote unquote the way. Knock on the doors so we can show you the way. And I think that that's just a part of the aspect of again, almost why a lot of people are having podcasts nowadays. It's the idea of wanting to leave some kind of indelible mark within the world that you're living in this quote unquote matrix that we're in. And I think that in doing so, we're actually attaching ourselves much more to it. Like by me having this thing, right, and trying to reach out, and even though it comes from a place of intention, of wanting to be good, of wanting to be honest, of wanting to be, as you said, authentic, there's still an air of ego. There's still an air of please like me. There's still an air of no matter how great the information is. You see what I'm saying, right? And I was just on a podcast yesterday, and I said to somebody, because I was very proud of myself, which is okay and not okay, but because I was able to, in a very short amount of time, get in touch with the director of biology from Quintana Roo, which is the state. Like I'm in, right? And I got to, I'm hanging out with the guy one-on-one. We're talking to each other on WhatsApp, and we're rebuilding. Well, I'm not. Over the past 5, 6, 7 years, he's taken 600 tons of trash out of a wetland area that's the only wetland area in the Yucatan that's in Cancun, next to a lagoon, next to these mangroves. So it's just this amazing piece of land. And right maybe a quarter mile away from it is a semi-brand new archaeological site that's called El Meco. And when you look at it on the map, here's the Laguna, like in the middle, and then El Meco's right here, and then Laguna Manati, like those spots, like right here. So they've actually found a pathway that goes from the pyramid through this forest to this one spot where they have this ecological park. And by chance alone, my friend was driving down in a scooter. He doesn't read Spanish. I saw it. I got him to pull over, and then the story started. And I just started calling people and asking, what does it take to put a tour on in Cancun? And my linchpin of this whole thing was the director of biology. By getting him involved, I got the state involved, and in a very short amount of time. I think it was just the right place, right time. They needed it. They liked the idea. They seen that it could work. Let's just see what happens with this crazy white American kid who's coming to town, riding it on his high horse, trying to put on tours in our city, basically. And they've given me the opportunity to give them a tour and show them what it is that I've come up with, which is nothing more than a tour, transportation company, which I've hired. Agreement with El Meco that if I bring people, I can have a tour guide and they'll tour them around. Third is that the biologist will go to the location and tour these people with me. And the fourth is that we go eat dinner at some place, and it's $55 per person, where any tour in Cancun, starting is like 75 and up. So to say something like that, to get to see all these beautiful places, and more so than that, out of that $55, 40 of it, or no more, right? 50? What is it? So the transportation gets paid $10 per person. Meco gets paid $10 per person. Laguna Manati gets paid $10 per person. So does the restaurant. I keep the rest, which goes towards office fees and VAs and blah, 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 whatever, and taxes. Got to remember the taxes. And so that's basically where I'm at. And I'm impressed because, and this is going back to what I was explaining, I'm impressed because I was able to put it together. But I said prior to even filming with the guy, I said, I don't care if it works though. I already did my part. Like, even if I never put this thing on, the fact that I got inspired, the fact that I went and touched this person, touched that person, touched that person, touched that person, and somehow or another they all coalesced to this one and said yes, done. I don't care if it works or it doesn't work anymore. I can still walk away now. It's somebody's idea. Something's going to happen. I don't have to do it. I'm going to do it. But before I even do it, and before I even thought about it, neither of it mattered, and it still doesn't matter. And I don't mean that in nothing matters. No, ride the Kali Yuga. Who cares? Idea, which is what everybody's running with now. Idea. Hey, the world's all built to crap and it's all going to crap. So why not just be crappy with the world, bro? What are you going to do? It's like, right? There's no God. Forget it. And so I, on the other hand, have a totally different understanding and feeling, and I think it comes from my psychedelic, I'm sure of it actually, from my psychedelic journeys, my DMT and my ayahuasca and my heavy mushrooms and all of my journeys. Acid, not so much. I think acid, which felt more like a roller coaster ride, whereas mushrooms and ayahuasca feel much more like a pleasant stream on a, well, I don't know, ayahuasca can get heavy sometimes, but they feel much more natural to me. Well, and I guess they are, right? Because obviously acid's not natural.
Well, like a lot of the plants, as we know, I've worked with a lot of different medicine people because, out of that whole experiment of, Grateful Dead culture, I got turned on to different types of spiritual perspectives of the world, different types of understandings. But as we came, I did spend a considerable amount of time. I mean, these days you go to any town anywhere in the world, there's always a cacao circle, an ayahuasca circle, and sound healing. It's become very much part of the general discourse. But the point being, a lot of these wisdom keepers who are curators of these plant medicines, they know that these plants do carry a history, an intelligence, that morphic resonance. They carry the history of all the people connected to that plant or to that experience. So it's a very powerful thing that, when done correctly, can really help shift things, and then gives you fresh, new, innovative perspectives. And not even talking about the stimulation of the brain and the neurons and the dopamines and the pineal gland, and how we can decalcify from all the things we've ingested, and just the hyper development that's happened in the world that isolates and keeps us away from nature. And like you said, in many places it's legal now. The medicinal value of these natural medicines and plants and psychoactive substances can be really, really beneficial. I mean, look at when the Apple computer, Wozniak, a lot of those guys, they were all big Bay Area psychedelic pioneers. I mean, these guys are the ones who created computers and microchips. So, you know, there's something to be said when we get outside of our limited perception and experience of reality. And like we were saying, that's exactly what happened, because just going back to, you know, being an athlete, getting into that, going out to California, my connection with the poetry of Jim Morrison, which, you know, even beyond the rock band, his poetry was extremely profound. It's like looking at a Salvatore Dali painting. There's a lot of cryptic stuff there, but for me, it really happened to rewind. Well, you talked about being a discordant. At 13, you know, I was into sports. I was like a good little Italian boy. I got hit by a car and had a near-death experience, and I actually had the moment of like seeing myself outside of myself. And from there, from the time I was 13 till you know, I got through junior high school and high school, and I was doing sports, and you know, I started to see through all these things like, wow, is it really about competition, or is life about collaboration? Was Darwin right? Is it really survival of the strongest, or is it survival of the most collaborative? And so by the time I got through high school and I got my car and graduated, I was ready to leave the East Coast, which has some beautiful aspects, but it's like the hub of the colonial intellectual mindset of very Judeo-Christian, it's New England. Like, look at England. So there was all those things, and it's like, go to California, the West is the best. And, you know, we just had to look at the music and the Renaissance that was happening there. So that fast tracked me from 84 to 87, really getting into studying different religions, disciplines, a lot of different, got to travel parts of the world. I really got into being a musician and a drummer. And I found that, you know, music and consciousness and the ability to have an open mind and communicate with other people became this force of change for me. And I found whenever I went places that it became a force of change for other people. Just having an open mind and an open heart. And of course, music, which is a universal language, is a great way to create and cultivate, germinate that common ground connection that people have. And I wanted to mention what you also said, because, you know, we're in an age where everyone's voice should be heard. So the idea of everyone having their own podcast is amazing, and being able to live stream on Facebook and YouTube and all these things. And another thing is, people are also, and this has really erupted over the last 4 or 5 years, they're discovering the sovereignty movement. Like, every human being, I mean, we're all interconnected and interdependent on each other. Like, I'm going to depend on you living next door not to put, you know, chlorine on your lawn to get in my groundwater and poison my groundwater. But the point is that there's been this huge accelerated evolution to the understanding of sovereignty. Now, some people did it as a reaction to what's happening with, you know, potential government overreach and control, and some of the exploitation and the agendas are playing out. But also there's a nature of sovereignty, realizing, you know what, I'm born alone. I come out of my mother's womb. When I die alone. I have my experience, and I have to like own that and take control, you know, somehow work with that and take control of it.
Sure.
And in a way that I'm really responsible for my life. I mean, there are people that are suffering, that, you know, there's other influences, but the sovereignty movement of people now coming out saying, you know, oh, I don't have to have a driver's license unless I'm a commercial driver. I can put my land into like a land patent, and I don't have to pay property taxes. I mean, there's this whole structure that people are realizing that we've been born into this matrix, you know, very much like the Matrix movie, but there are ways to get out of that and to enjoy a higher quality of life and sovereignty and, you know, liberty, freedom, without it being just a political, governmental concept. So all of these things now, again, going back to the 60s and exploration of consciousness and self, and, you know, it's a fascinating time, really, to be alive. And you're in such a great
place. It really is.
I love it.
It really, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that we are, on some level, and I've said this, I haven't said this for a long time, but I feel like we are the last bastions of humanity. Like, we are the last the last meat sacks that get produced the way we used to get produced. Specifically in the last year, where we have started genetic alterations because of the chimera gene that was created that uses the mRNA vaccine. And when I say that, people don't know what I'm talking about, and it really upsets me because there's videos I've posted so many times that show exactly what the two doctors, who are women, created and how it's used. Now, when the video was shown and it was created, it shows how you can actually manipulate a DNA strand. Although, what I understand of the vaccine that was created for COVID, it does not manipulate the human DNA. It is manipulating the COVID DNA. This is what I've been told. Well, and I've also been told that in doing so, last part, that in doing so, it creates white blood cells which go and fight the thing that's creating the new layer, which is to kill the outside layer of a COVID. And what happens is that your body has to fight that because instead of learning the virus, it's fighting this thing that's fighting itself. And that's where you get long-term COVID from. And because there's this idea that you can have COVID for a long time, and the reason for that is because the booster shots are you giving extra mRNA shot to this thing that's killing the virus, which is not really killing the virus, it's just killing the outside wall of a virus, which is supposed to, therefore, destroy it. Something to that effect. Well, so it's weird because we're just not learning how to actually fight it, is what it is. So, at least those who took the pokey poke.
Well, as you're saying, I mean, let's admit it. We have transhumanism. Most people walk around. I mean, if they could embed a cell phone in their neck and just have it that way, they would. We know that there's microchip happening. We know. I mean, look at the CRISPR. We already know that they've been successfully cloning for decades. I mean, Biden just signed the Disclosure Act. So, there's a lot of stuff. I always say that the true nature of reality is sometimes best contemplating while sitting comfortably terrified in your bed with a blanket pulled over your head, because if people actually really critically look at what's happening in the world and looked at the truth and knew the truth of not just what they consume through, mainstream media, there's a lot of stuff when we pull the curtain back. Remember the Wizard of Oz, they pull the curtain back. It's like, I am the great Oz. Oh, it's like a guy pulling levers. So all of this stuff, transhumanism, the work that's happening now with AI, I mean, we are such at the cutting edge of planetary global change, of humanity change, consciousness. And, for me, it's another kind of zeitgeist moment of, wow, how is this going to play out? And I think that's why, talking about how everyone has a podcast or this or that, that's why I think we need more discourse, we need transparency, and we need authenticity so we can have these conversations so that collectively we can guide the human experience in the future in the way that the majority of people want it, and not just end up a victim of, Mr. Schwab and the World Economic Forum. Like, you're going to own nothing and you're going to eat crickets and you're going to be happy. So
happy, right? Yeah. So here's my next. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, along with the outroll of central bank digital currency, the crash of the U.S. dollar, the BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now others, North Korea, Iran, getting off the U.S. dollar to trade oil with, the crash of, this could get into the realm of, this all sounds like conspiracy stuff.
No, it's not. It's all real. It's all happening. So here's my next question for you, and this is where it's going to get weird in the conversation. At least I think it will for you. As of the past year and a half to 2 years, I've turned into a hardcore transhumanist eugenics. It may not make sense, but I see it as the future, and I see it as almost no ability to change that. And so, I mean, I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I truly believe that the next stage of humanity is going to be eugenics and transhumanism. And that leads us down this primrose path of this 250 years of fighting ourselves until we are almost robots and the robots are almost humans, and then we find some kind of symbiosis, and then we move into our next evolutionary step, whatever that is. And then pulling all of that back, do you believe in the Terence McKenna stoned ape theory and cooking meat?
Elaborate a little more. I know who Terence McKenna is, of course, and I have heard of that, but I want to educate me a little more about that, please.
So his concept is basically this: at around the same time that we find how to eat meat that is cooked, which in doing so made our stomachs smaller and our brains larger because we were eating more protein. We were also eating psychedelic mushrooms. And the idea is that in doing the psychedelic mushrooms and eating meat, we started to copulate more. And in doing so, we were copulating more while having psychedelic experiences. So therefore, the people who were coming in through the portal of consciousness that a woman is, were coming through with mycelium being pushed through their DNA, and in turn we started to evolve into more intelligent versions of ourselves.
I would say it makes sense by nature. It's very possible. As you know, there's a lot of people right now because, and this is an interesting point, you know, it depends how we look at human history, right? If you've read anything from people like Greg Braden or Jim West, who, anyways, we found out by looking up things like the Sphinx, Teleka Beki, that we're actually on the verge of disclosing that there might have been countless periods of human history where there's been the rise and fall of civilization. So even though we want to say, you know, 20,000 years ago, we were all Stone Age people and we came across the Bering Strait, if you look at other places of the world, I mean, even in places like Bulgaria, they just came out and exposed that the Thracian culture there, which had metallurgy, is over 7,000 years old. So, you know, we're constantly, the history we learn in our school book might not necessarily be the true history of humanity. So if we think
no, I think that's definitely been manipulated hardcore, right? And there's that, have you heard of this idea called the not the Great Flood, but the Great mud flood or something like this? Where supposedly there's whole cities that have been buried underneath. Like, we're talking about real buildings and like not just like, we're talking about buildings, like full on like Empire State Building style buildings that have been buried under the ground, and we're just like, it's just another layer that we're on top of.
Very interesting, because I used to do a workshop called, I had this fascination with being an interfaith minister in religious studies. It was called Ancient Prophecies, Future Visions of World Cultures. You know how many cultures in the world talk about a great flood, not just from the Noah Judeo-Christian perspective.
Almost all of them. Maybe go back to,
And then if you look at John White, Global Pole Shift, I mean, actually right now, people might not be aware that over the last few decades, the Earth is already going through a global magnetic pole shift event. And they say that these happen potentially about every 26,000 years. And it could mean an ice age, it could mean global warming. So I like what you said about Terence McKenna. It's very possible. It's also very possible that humanity could be hundreds of thousands of years old, had very high civilizations, possibly germinated by extraterrestrial or non-terrestrial beings that came here. So, there's so many fascinating concepts. I wouldn't say that I necessarily buy into any specific one, but I do know there's an agenda to suppress the truth. And a big part of the truth is that human beings have been here a lot longer than we think. And, the Tamil culture in India, there's huge civilizations and now in the ocean that are very ancient. And we're finding these places, how do they build something? The Bosnian Sun Pyramid, how it's bigger than the pyramids of Egypt. How is that built? How ancient of it is? How can that even exist by the old narrative and timeline? But people don't want to see the truth. They want to keep the blanket pulled up. They want to lay there in bed and kind of just hold on to their perspective of.
Here's my next question for you, Michael. I was actually going to touch on what you just said, but a different way, because I just heard Bill Maher. Was it Bill Maher? No, it was. Give me a second. I'll tell you right now because I'm looking on my page. I posted. It's New Rule. It was Bill Maher. It's New Rule from Bill Maher, and he talks about Israel, and they're asking, do you think that they're going to allow? He's like, do you think they're going to allow for Israel to disappear? What are you guys thinking? And then the other part of it that he says is something to the effect of this idea of like, how many times has Palestine been, quote unquote, taken over by other people that were not Jews, and at no point in time did the world go crazy. It's been 20,000 or so people that have passed away in Palestine, but last night over 150,000 people or something like that passed away in the Ukraine or somewhere in Darfur. I don't know, but we're talking slaughtering amounts of people, thousands of times more than what you're seeing now. And where's the outrage? Where are the people in the streets? Where is everybody for the people from whatever other country? They're not there. And it's also fair to note that a lot of the money that's out there that's going towards all of these nonprofit organizations that are going against Jewish people are funded by Jewish people. I'm not kidding. And I don't mean that like in the way that they're doing it on a purpose like level to like create problems. They're doing it because they're just trying to be good people and help other people. And they give this money, and then that money gets taken and gets used in the most asinine, incorrect ways. I mean, look at how much money the United States gives to the Palestinians, and Hamas takes that and then builds these amazingly crazy tunnels that are 60 some odd miles long in every direction. And they even call it the underground subway. And when you look at the building of those things, they didn't just do some kind of like a hanky-panky, I don't know how to build an underground. No, they built underground pathways. It's crazy. So, I don't know, like where this whole thing leads us as far as where were we, what could we have been, what can we possibly be. My question, which goes back to transhumanism and is also a question about identity in ourselves, is how and what part of you is you?
Well, that's a fascinating question because we're still understanding the even nature of reality and we're unraveling history, which is interesting because I hear a lot of people talk about right now, it's the apocalypse and this and that. There's all sorts of crazy, We're waiting because Jesus is going to come and save everybody, and the rapture, and I'm going to be teleported up like in Star Trek to, heaven, and I'm going to be So there's a lot of interesting philosophies, and I'm not a person that likes to challenge people's beliefs. At least people believe in something. But the point is that we're just starting to understand the true nature of reality and of people. And I think it's really fascinating because even the idea of human beings have a soul, what happens after death, these kind of questions, does alien life exist, is becoming more and more prolific and part of the mainstream. Now, whether that's a thirst for people just wanting to, they're bored and they want to believe there's more to life than just we're born from our mother's womb, we walk around as a meat puppet, and then we die and we turn to ash, and that's it, game over. Or that there is some other, metaphysical, mystical, esoteric, meaning or aspect of life. And even right now in quantum physics, they're talking about quantum mechanics and how our thoughts affect reality, and Dr. Emoto, and how our emotions affect the structure of water. And, the idea of now people doing sound healing, and we're using scalar frequencies to do things like affect cancer cells. I call it actually the Regenaissance. It's like there's the Renaissance, but we have those called the Regenaissance, because I think what's happening, and this is my perspective, whatever is old, and I'm saying this as a brother, I'm old school in so many ways. I love it. I love where I came from, the history, the culture, the music, like so many things. I also am not afraid of technology. I embrace the future. But we're in this place now where all the old stories are being exposed, stuff like Epstein's Island, pedophilia, human trafficking, like all this stuff is coming to the surface.
It's great. Yeah.
So once we get through all of this stuff, maybe we'll have a better understanding of the world and what the truth is. And if you look at the word apocalypse, it just means to see through, or to see the true nature of something. So if we are in an apocalypse, I think it's a good thing, because we have to get rid of all this illusionary stuff. And as scary as it can be, we need to, for me, as painful as it can be, I want to know the nature of reality. I want to know myself.
Yep.
I want to have the most incredible life I can. And it doesn't happen by hiding under the covers and just believing what, I'm told on CNN or Fox News. We have to think for ourselves. We have to exercise our sovereignty and our ability to investigate things. But it's a really exciting and dynamic time right now in human history, probably even more so than ever in our lifetimes, or for thousands of years.
I want to go back to that Bill Maher thing that I was mentioning, because I just remember what he said that was the hit home for me, which was, and I'm paraphrasing like crazy, but he says, we have to wake up from the mass delusion of lying to ourselves that we're okay and that we're not doing anything wrong to each other. And that helped me really understand this next statement when I said to my mom, you're not angry, and if you are, that's somebody else in your life, it's not you. And she was like, wow, that was really intense. It was like, you really hit me pretty hard with that. And I was like, well, it's true. Everything I know about even you, Michael, or myself, or anyone that I meet, I know instinctively that they are massively beautiful. And it is only other people in their lives that have hurt them that have created the issue and problem that makes them hurt others. And i.e. the line, hurt people. You know what I mean?
Oh, that is such a big saying. I hear that so much lately, because we come from a culture of PTSD. So
yeah, and then I have this other statement, and I think I mentioned to you earlier, or maybe I haven't, but I always say that I don't get angry at a blacksmith's son for being a blacksmith. Like, I can't get angry. You're fine. I can't get angry at somebody for, I got you. I can't get angry at somebody for having to be the person that they have to be, For instance, that person who is a blacksmith's son, let's just say 1400 years ago, and that kid says to his dad, well, I want to go be a minstrel, Dad. I'm not going to be a blacksmith. Then that means that that person's whole city will most likely disappear within a 20-year period. If the father dies and there's nobody else left to, beat on the metal and create the wheels and create the hinges and create the bullets and create all the things that are needed, then you have no city. And but you got a minstrel. I guess maybe that kind of works out. But what can you do? I hope your ordering is complete. Either way, I'll bring you back. But that's why I always say I don't get angry at a blacksmith son for being a blacksmith, because and the other part of that is I was in Indonesia. I met these two kids who sold like fake, tchotchke items to people on the street, and I bought McDonald's for them 2 days in a row. And they were like super thankful and crying over McDonald's, which didn't make sense to me. But after sitting down with them, I realized that they worked for $50 a month for 5 people, and they live in a corrugated metal aluminum shed. Hold on, I think your mic's turned off. I think you turned your mic off, Mike.
Yep.
There you go.
I wanted to avoid background noise, and I was.
Oh no, you're fine. No, you're fine. And I was kind of miking you off, and I got you, and you're good, and no stress.
Tasking.
Yeah, I got you. No, I kind of kicked you out there and kicked you back in, but you're good. No stress. But yeah, so that's why I say that. But going back to those two kids, I asked one of them, and like, why are you not running away from Indonesia and going and living another life where you can go, have a better life? And the answer was, I can't, and neither can my brother, because my mother and my sister can't work. They live in a Muslim country, and my father has a leg that's broken that won't allow him to, have a job. Your mic, you hit your mic button again.
Yeah, I think AI is taking over the call at this point. I'm like,
and Chris, my friend Chris, Alejandro Otero, which is a good friend of mine as well as yours. He said, I'm glad you both met. And then Chris Wood, a friend of mine, he comes in and he says, you're having a reasonably interesting conversation here. Most folks can't do that these days. Anger, sometimes you have to act like a wrestler. Oh, God, it's so true. Where he's just saying that, even you and I have had a couple moments where we agree or disagree, or we playfully disagree, even just to extend the conversation and understand each other a bit better. And he's like, wow, it's so great to see people doing this.
Well, we got to agree to disagree.
Yeah, and that's a good question.
Well, I'll say this. I just want to add this real quick. I have yet to meet someone who knows the absolute and ultimate truth. And if they think they do, either they're making a lot of money as a guru or a politician, or they just have a huge ego and they don't want to look at reality. And it's hard to, Baba Ram Dass said, the greatest institution of social change happens in the heart. Inspiring a heart is easy. Changing a mind is almost impossible.
Possible. Yep. That's a great line from him. I love another one from him, which is walking through the forest and seeing the trees bit. I don't know if you know this bit. I'm sure you do. But he says, I'm walking through the forest by myself, and I see all these beautiful trees. One's bent, and it's like bent in this really weird manner, but it's doing so they can touch the sunlight. And another one is really strong, and it's really tall, but it's barely got any leaves. Each one of them I'm completely amazed at. Each one I'm completely, filled with some kind of passion over the idea of these trees. And then he stops. He goes, when I'm in the city, I wish I could look at people like I do trees. And it's like, wow, how intense is that? Like, all of us are bent. All of us are hard. Some of us have hair on our head. Some of us don't. Some of us are bending in a certain way just so we can touch the light. and what an amazing sentiment in what he was trying to, express to the world in such a beautiful analogy,
Well, that's the beauty of the diversity of 8 billion people on the planet. I mean, if everything was homogenized and the same, life would just not be interesting. So,
which makes me now ask my next question, which is, do you feel that political correctness will get us to a place where we're all wearing gray?
ugh, God forbid. That's all I can say because.
But I mean, that would make sense, right? Like, your color offends me. So at one point, even color, you can't wear red or blue or even green because it hurts my feelings.
Oh God, I'm trying to remember the name of the movie where there's like a theater and there's a voice on the screen. It looks very like black and white, almost like this zoom in.
What was that, 1984? Yeah, 1984. 1984.
There you go. Thank you. And everyone's sitting there in gray and it's like, oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always been part of the dystopian kind of science fiction, futuristic. Dystopian is gray. Dystopian is the socialism movement has taken over completely, and there is no autonomy, there is no free will, there is no. And I honestly, here's the weird part, I feel like we're headed there. And I feel like part of it is good, and I feel like a lot of it's bad. And this is why I've turned into a transhumanist, Michael. It goes all the way back to when we were sitting around a campfire and we were trying to express ideas to each other. I believe we wished that we could speak without speaking and understand without having to use words. And I feel as though that's what we all wish we could do. Like, what wouldn't it be great if we could take all 1 hour and 17 minutes and 7 seconds of you and I talking and never have to do any of it and just do this to each other? Boop. And in that one moment of you and I doing that, we understand everything we just talked about for 1 hour and 17 minutes in one touch.
Well,
and
actually,
anybody
if people want, I didn't mean to disturb you. If people want, for $29.99, I do have the USB stick here in my neck that I can pull out and duplicate, and I'll happily send an email to anyone anywhere in the world who would like to get the digital download version on the cybernetic discourse of our conversation.
Yeah, but listen, you jokingly say this, but it's funny because I had Ross Jeffries on, who was the guy who created the seduction movement. I don't know if you know who that is, but very famous NLP guy. And he actually has his own NLP bot, which answers questions like him. And it's fun to play with. And it really does answer questions like him. It's really crazy. So,
well, that's fascinating. I mean, look at movies like Blade Runner, Johnny Mnemonic, right? It's like, and even even the new generation of Tesla robots just came out. I mean, it's like not that far off. Self-driving cars.
Yeah, listen, almost everything that man does is, for me, layered in alien tech in some way, shape, or form. Like, that guy's got a connection to something with someone that's got some kind of connection to something and also the car floating in the air was a little fake for me, but whatever. And I don't know that we've actually gone off the planet. That's another thing, but I could be wrong.
Right.
The whole Van Allen belt thing is a bit much for me. Just, how did they get through the Van Allen belt? Period. That's all I want to know. Well, that's the one.
I would love to propose. See, you warned me. You're like, oh, let's do this podcast. I was like, oh, great. Like, I'm not like I love deep discourse. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll come on for a half hour. And you're like, oh, okay. I'm like, well, maybe an hour. And you're like, well, beware, because the last person said that. And it was like 2.5 hours later. So
I'm telling you, Mike, it happens, man. I don't do it on purpose. What happens is I just have a conversation. I'm not trying to have a podcast. The thing that most people understand is that I'm not trying to have a podcast. I mean, I want a podcast, but that's not the idea here. The idea is always about just allowing. Look, how many times in your life, Michael, have you talked to somebody that you either met for the first time or somebody you haven't talked for 5 or 6 or 7 years, and you end up having one of these conversations, and 3/4 of the way in, you go, bro, we should have recorded this. How many times has that happened to you in your life? That's what this conversation, that's what these conversations are. It's those conversations that you were supposed to record. We're recording it.
Well, let's do this. Look, I would love to. I feel like,
I'm ahead of you, Mike. I'm ahead of you, so let me do it. Let me do it for you. Hey, Michael DiMartino, I have had an amazing time with you today. Could you do me a favor and tell people how they can find you, where they can get you, and how they can get back to you? And before you even go, and before I say goodbye to you, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I had an absolute blast with you. We will talk again. You will text me. Santa has come to town.
He's bringing
but yeah,
some
let everybody know how they can find you.
He's got some microdoses, and you can usually find me here this time of year. I'm usually at the North Pole, but I'm deep within an alien underground base in southern Colorado. But I do accept phone calls and emails, so you can email me at Michael, Michael, drum13@gmail.com. Or you can actually call me at 530-362-8264. And I just wanted to say that I would love to do another deep dive with you at some point. I feel like we just started to scratch.
Oh, we barely even touched. I know we did. So yeah, no, I was going to invite you anyways to ask you to come back and do another one. I would more than be happy to have you on again.
That would be amazing. I really want to thank you for your time and your commitment, your enthusiasm, your street magic, and you're just like grabbing it by the horns and doing it, brother. And I really appreciate and respect that. And you're giving people a voice.
Doing my best. I'm doing my best, Michael. I mean, it might not be that great, but it's good for me.
Well, it's authentic, and sometimes things not being scripted or, this or that. I mean, there's too much veneer out there. We need to get real and get into the authenticity, and you're bringing it. Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, it's what I've been trying to do it for years, man. I really have. And I'm kind of petting myself right now. It's weird. After what you just said, because there's a part of me for years that has been like, weirdly unhappy with my choices because I was afraid of what society would think. And I've gotten to a point where I just don't care anymore what society thinks. And it's not about society. It's about my journey. And I really want society to come on my journey and enjoy the ride with me, but if nobody wants to come anymore, bro, I don't care. I'm just going to keep doing me and keep being weird and make noises and talk. And it's going to be okay.
Well, it seems to be working. It's a formula for happy life, quality of life.
Yes, sir. 100%.
We should talk. I might be down in the Yucatan sometime this spring. There's a big global gathering of people in Palenque, and I'll share more with you about that offline. But dynamic times, a lot happening.
Yeah, I would love to do anything with you. I also have I don't know. Do you know the group Dawn and Nash? Please check out them. They were on my episode. They are a duo, and they are all about creating music for caretakers to remember to care for themselves.
Wow.
Bro, you would love them, and they do a lot of the same work that you're doing with a lot of the same people, all of it. Very cool. And they were, I think, 2 episodes before you. So, yeah, check them out, listen to them, maybe connect with them, and let's all get together and let's all start this movement in a way. And I said that to them. I was like, you guys need to come to Tulum, Yucatan area, bro. It's blowing up here. And they're having these massive gatherings down here. And you can tell the people are here. The energy, the people, if you know what I'm talking about. They're
Absolutely.
here, man. They're everywhere. And I see them nonstop. I was walking down the street, I don't know, 4 days ago, and this woman had this shirt on, and I go, ayahuasca? And she goes, oh, no, it's just a T-shirt. I go, nobody just wears that T-shirt. She's like, I go, have you ever heard of mindarmy.org? And she's like, no, what's that? And I was like, you should check them out. They're all about legalization of psychedelics and how to, like, you should check them out too. Mindarmy.org. A great nonprofit organization that's going out of their way to try and change all of the lobbying and blah, 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 so that we can actually do something with our medical system and start to get to have our own choices and not have to pay for insurance, which doesn't insure us.
Absolutely. Let's admit it. You know, Western medicine is great for some of the stuff, but the reality is it's a business and they want return clients. They're not there necessarily to cure you or heal you. They're there to keep you dependent on coming back and pharmaceuticals and surgeries. And again, allopathic medicine can be great, but if you start to know about Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine and herbalism and, different things, you kind of realize, oh, well, this is how the world did it before.
And again, I agree with you. Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with you that I don't know when it happened. I think it was in the 1930s and 40s. I did a super deep dive with a guy, and we did 8 episodes, okay? When I say 8, I mean, I'm talking 8, 2, 3, 4 hour episodes. So we were on it, at least I was. And I think I called it The Evolution of Destruction. And it starts from like it starts at the end of slavery and the beginning of the corporations calling property entities and getting into Black's Law. And then also, I don't know if you know this, but the United States had something called the American Eugenics Society from 1890 from 1890 to 1920. And then all of the scientists that we used, we sent them to Germany. And after the war, we brought them right back.
Oh, yeah. That's why I want to do a deep dive with you. There's so much we can unearth.
So done.
I'm on the verge of a glycemic coma, but I
can tell. No. Look at me, bro. I'm like over here. I'm ready to eat too. You have no idea, bro. I'm about to go outside, smoke a joint, smoke a cigarette, and munch like crazy. So, again, Michael DiMartino, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you too, brother.
We'll see you soon, man.
I have a feeling I'll see you down in Cancun at some point this spring. Be well.
Yes, you will. I'll see you soon, man. Have a great day, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for all you do.
No worries. I don't know what to tell you. I really don't know what to tell you. Like, at the beginning of this whole entire thing, right, when we started this whole thing and we were just trying to be, I want to do it anyway. I never thought that I would get to have the conversations that I had with people. I really never thought that they would be what they have been and the way that they go and all of it. So I thank you guys for even watching them. I thank you for staying here. And with all of that, if you would not mind, please go out into the world, do something nice for somebody else today. And if you can't, do something nice for yourself. It does start with you. Number 2, don't get caught up in all the crazy stuff, because if you do, then you end up crazy, poopy, and that's not good for you and me, and we all get poopy. Okay, and number 3, if you could, please like, share, subscribe, send this out to somebody who would like to see it. And with that, my friends, I love you, and I will see you all, you know where? On the other side.